Good morning, folks. We are at the second to last session on our Kings. I think Tony's finishing up next week. And today we're going to cover 2 Kings, chapters 18, 19, and 20. Yeah, I don't see that happening. We'll see how that goes. So we're going to study King Hezekiah. You will also find this same story in the book of Isaiah, because we'll find out here that Isaiah was a prophet who was a friend with an acquaintance of King Hezekiah, and was part of his inner council. So let me just give you a little bit of background where things were before Hezekiah became king. His dad had been the ruler before him. Not a good guy, was not popular, was mean guy, and caused a lot of dissension in the country. Meanwhile, the Assyrians had started to attack the northern kingdom and had started to take over and capture a lot of those cities and villages in the northern kingdom. Hezekiah was the king of Judah, and that's where we start in chapter 18. If I go through, and I'm not going to read, since we're doing 3 chapters, and I'm not going to read all 3 chapters to you today. I hope you don't mind that. But it starts off, we talk about at age 25, Hezekiah becomes king. 3 years later, Samaria becomes under siege by the Assyrians. And 3 years after that, so 6 years into the rule of Hezekiah, the whole northern kingdom had been conquered by the Assyrians. Now, the importance of that is that Hezekiah learns a lesson here that he sees what happens when people reject the Lord and his word. And that had happened in the northern kingdom, that they kind of left God, they had gone separate ways and become rejected and allowed to be conquered by the Assyrians. So beginning on in verse 3, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, and for up to that time, the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nehushtan. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands of the Lord and had given Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not want to serve him. From watchtower to fortified city, he defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory. So what we first see here is that Hezekiah becomes a king who becomes obedient to the Lord. He removes the high places. And what had happened over the years is there was a lot of individual altars that were built all over the countryside. He eliminated those and made the temple the main place to worship the Lord. These altars were popular for sacrifices, and he felt that it was not what God intended, that God was not in favor of this practice and wanted everything to come back. This bronze serpent, if you remember back to the Exodus days, Moses had built to look upon and be spared from the snake bites, and that's what you find in the book of Numbers, okay? This serpent now was some 800 years old and had been part of Jerusalem and other places since that time. But the problem with that is it was becoming an idol at this point. People were actually praying to this serpent. Instead of it being a reminder of what had happened and a protector, it was now being seen as something to pray to. It was an idol. So Hezekiah decided to destroy that. And we learn from that sometimes good things over time become idols. If we have them around and we like them and we feel comfortable with them, eventually they become idols that we worship. That's not what God and Hezekiah was in favor of. So he destroyed that. This word in here, Nehushtan, that's what they called this idol. Simply the translation of that was piece of brass. So it wasn't anything spectacular here. It was just kind of a description of it. Hezekiah was passionate in his trust of God. His father had been, which is interesting because his father had been evil, and now he's become God-fearing. And probably because, as we kind of see as it goes along here, Isaiah is a major influence on Hezekiah. More of an influence apparently than his father was, because he now was going to follow the Lord. During his reign, the Lord was with him, it says here in 7 and 8. He fulfilled the promise to David and his descendants that if they obeyed God, that his reign would be secure. And he felt comfortable with that. He understood that, and that was the idea that he had, that if I do what my father David, or grandfather David, had done, and I follow the Lord, because of that promise, my reign will be secure. It says he rebelled against Assyria and became a strong leader in Judah. In Hezekiah's fourth year, which was the seventh year, let me skip over some of this here. In any event, we start to see that the Assyrians come to Judah. They had already defeated the northern kingdom. They come to Judah. The Assyrians started to take Israel captive because, like I said, they did not hear the voice of the Lord. And again, this is what would happen to them if they didn't follow the Lord. So as they come to Judah, then Hezekiah has a decision to make here. How do I stop this from happening, okay? So starting in verse 13, in the 14th year of the reign, the king of Assyria attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent his message to the king of Assyria. I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver, 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasures of the palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord and gave it to the king of Assyria. So how does this show, what is King Hezekiah's response to Assyria coming to Judah? How does he opt to defend his land?
Pay tribute or bribe the king of Assyria.
Pay him off. Pay him off. And he gives him he gives him silver. He even strips the gold off the temple to give to Hezekiah in the attempt to save the kingdom, right? To bribe him from not coming here. So what happens, though, is Judah now is poor. I mean, all of their silver and their gold is gone. It's made them weak. This king takes the money and he says, what do I do now? But what does this tell you about this relationship that he has with God? He talks earlier about, I have a trust in the Lord. As long as I do the things that I'm right with the Lord, he's going to protect my reign. And when the Assyrians show up, what does he do? He caves. He doesn't have this faith in the Lord, does he? He says, no, I'm not going to I don't know if I want to trust this. I'm going to see if I can figure this out some other way. I'm going to pay him off. He bargains with the king instead, takes things from the temple instead of trusting in the protection of the Lord. So the king, meanwhile, he gets more bold then. Let me change the paper. In the backstory, by the way, one of the things that Hezekiah is hoping now is that the Egyptians are going to come help out. They're going to be part of a force that will protect Judah. So he's also relying on some other party to help him. Isaiah, meanwhile, tries to persuade him that don't trust Egypt. They're not coming with you. Trust in the Lord. Don't trust in Egypt. So meanwhile, then, this Assyrian general starts taunting Judah. He wants to shake the trust in God. He wants to demoralize them and turn the people against Hezekiah. And that starts in 19, but I want to skip down to 21. Look, I know you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it, such as the Pharaoh of King Egypt, to all of you who depend on him. But if you say to me, we are depending on the Lord our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials if you are depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, I have come to attack and destroy this place without word from the Lord. The Lord himself told me to march against the city and destroy it. So what's this king telling Israel? What's he doing here?
He's telling him God not with him. He's telling him, he's undermining him, trying to tell him that you think your God's helping you. Where is he?
Yeah, where's your God? Your God's helping me right now. Your God told me to destroy you. That's what he's saying here, right? And he's trying to show these people, don't follow Hezekiah. He took down these altars. He made it harder for you to worship the Lord. This is an awesome plan. He's not good for you. Follow me. I'll take care of you. I'll give you these horses. You can defend yourself. You don't need Egypt's help. Don't trust Egypt. He says, your God has to be mad at you. I'll let you go if you just surrender. Where else have we seen this kind of a promise from someone? I will give you all of this stuff if you just follow me. I'm sorry, from Satan? Where? Tempting Jesus. The same kind of concept here. I will give all this. I'll spare you. I'll give you all these horses. We'll let you survive. Just surrender to me and we'll be here. So we kind of see here way back in the book of Kings, we start to see this thing happening, right? We see the same kind of story come back. Then in chapters 20, in verses 26 and 27, he's told, and we have these messengers going back and forth. It says, we want you to speak Aramaic instead of Hebrew. Why do you think that might have been? I didn't know either, so I had to look this up. Aramaic was the official language that the diplomats used. And by this time, or at this time, a lot of the people of Israel did not speak that. They speak Hebrew. So the king's messengers says, let's talk in Aramaic, let's not talk in Hebrew, because they didn't want the people to know about these threats and about these promises and that kind of thing. So the response from the king is, was it only to your master and you to that my master sent me to say these things, and not to the people sitting on the wall who, like you, will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine? Now he's talking there about a siege. What's going to happen if I put a siege on here? This is how bad things are going to get for you. Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Syria. Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me, come out to me, then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine and fig tree and drink water from your own cistern until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life, not death. And then he goes on to continue this same kind of bargaining directly to the Hebrew people, the people of Judah. Follow me, don't do this. So I'm thinking about the people who hear this. What are they thinking at this point, do you think? We can take this deal, or what? Or we can become slaves of the Assyrians? That doesn't sound like a great deal to me. So you can see that there's got to be unrest developing in Judah here over the king and his loyal subjects here. So what happens? Hezekiah goes to the Lord. When King Hezekiah heard this, and I'm at chapter 19, by the way, if anybody's following along. He tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and went into the temple of the Lord. He sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna the secretary, leading priest, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah. They told him, this is what Hezekiah says. This day is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when children come to the moment of birth and there is no strength to deliver them. It may be that the Lord your God will hear all the words of the field commander, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to ridicule the living God, and that he will rebuke them for the words the Lord your God has heard. Therefore, pray for the remnant that still survives. When King Hezekiah's officials came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, tell your master this. So what does Hezekiah do? He goes and he prays. He says, I need your help here. And he asks Isaiah to intervene, to talk to God here. And Isaiah is in a position now where he says, do not be afraid of what you've heard. Those words with the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Listen, when he hears a certain report, I will make him want to return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with the sword. So we have Isaiah now coming up and saying, hold up. And now he's in a position here where he has to decide, I've been asked to intervene here by the king to talk to God. So what do we do here? So how does, when the king does this, there are a couple of ways that he did some right things here. He did some wrong things when he tried to bargain before, but now he does some right things. He does the torn clothes and the sackcloth, which is, of course, a deep expression of meaning, of mourning. We've seen that throughout this Old Testament. He doesn't allow this mourning to reject the Lord, but understands now that it's more necessary than regularly to seek the Lord. He goes to the temple, but not in the holy place, but he goes to the temple, and he seeks the word of the Lord through the prophet Isaiah. And he says, Lord, you've been blasphemed here. You've been called out. Isaiah, pray for us. Only Jerusalem is left. So God speaks in verses 6 through 7 back through Isaiah. And Isaiah is now in a spot where he doesn't take this lightly. He knows that the fate of the nation is on what he says right now. His own credibility as a prophet is on the line here. What he says is either going to happen or it's not going to happen. Either God is going to intervene and protect them or he's not. And now he's going to either be known as a real prophet or a false prophet. Yeah. Eddie.
And I look at God who came here as a child, like I look at some of the denominational preachers who come to some of us and say, we have choir, we have a lot of activity for our kids, we have a lot of things for our senior citizens, we do a lot of work in the community. Won't you come over and visit with us, sit with us, get to know us? You might enjoy what we do. And he's no different than what goes on in our time today. Always a message of Satan to make it sound like it's a God message. And they use it to make it sound so sweet. And if you're not strong in God, see, they had Isaiah, who was one of God's great prophets. All they had to do is listen. Like today, all we have to do is listen to the word of God. We should be able to divide what is true, what's not true, who's speaking true, who's not speaking true. And it's the same thing today, like it was somebody with a sweet message to try to lure you away from the house of God.
To lure you away from the house of God, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean we can't advertise the church, but yeah, you have to be careful. We talked about that a while back on, I think Joe talked about that last week. There's a lot of different, or 2 weeks ago, there's a lot of different messages out there. You have to pick out which one you want to follow, right? Okay, so then in verses, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. In verses 8 through 13 then, the Assyrian general, goes back and continues to blaspheme. He says, you guys are going to, your king, your God is not going to take care of you. We're going to destroy you basically. We're going to take things over. Don't trust in your God. Continues to taunt God. And then starting in verse 14, Hezekiah receives the letter from the messengers and read it. You know, they're sending messengers back and forth. They're not like going on television and giving press conferences and doing these things. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord again and spread the message out before the Lord on the altar. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. It is true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste to these nations and their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them. For they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands. Now, God our Lord our God, deliver us from this hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God. So he takes the message, he takes it and he lays it out before God. Here's the message. He says, save us from this. He doesn't go to Isaiah this time. He goes directly to the Lord in the temple. And the way he prays here is kind of interesting. You see anything about that, the style of that prayer that's interesting to you?
Well, two kinds of conflicting messages. One is, okay, here's this dude, this general who's insulting you. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, he's saying,
He says, you are the God. You are the one. You need to fix this. You've been blasphemed. You've been embarrassed. You've been taunted. Don't let this happen. You can't do this. You got to, and he's got a taunting God here himself, isn't he? You, God, the God, these are your people. You have to do something about this, right? He says, Lord, hear what's going on. See what's going on here. He sent ridicule to you. You need to take care of this.
I think, Gary, there's an admission, maybe a realization on Hezekiah's part that everything this commander has said is true. And so there's nobody else that can take care of this but you, God.
That's,
So I think there's this realization in his mind, Hezekiah's mind, that there's no place else to turn.
and I think Hezekiah,
Go to Egypt, I can't
right.
go to wherever. You're the only person that can fix it.
And I think Hezekiah is also thinking it's his own fault too, because he's really mishandled this up to this point. So he's putting it on God, yeah. So the next section is kind of long, but it's interesting because God answers back. And the first part of this says, and this is through Isaiah again, in verse 20, I have heard your prayer concerning Sennacherib, king of Israel. So, firstly, and we're going to find out that there is some answer, some deliverance by the Lord. But I'm thinking that this is a pretty important section here when he says, I have heard your prayer. And I'm thinking about, what if this prayer doesn't happen? What if Hezekiah doesn't ask for help here? Are things different? Does God intervene later on? And when we think about that in our own lives, how does that affect us? If we just let it ride, does it make a difference? Is it important for us to ask God for things? Because I'm wondering if he doesn't pray here, is there a different outcome? Because it looks here like it makes a difference to God. I have heard your prayer. I'm going to read through this as fast as I can. Virgin daughter Zion despises you and mocks you. Daughter Jerusalem tosses her head as you flee. Who is it you have ridiculed and blasphemed? Against whom you have raised your voice and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel? By your messengers you have ridiculed the law, Lord, and you have said, with many chariots, I have ascended the heights of the mountains, the utmost heights of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars, the choicest of its junipers. I have reached its remotest parts, the finest of its forests. I have dug wells in foreign lands and drunk the water there. With the soles of my feet I have dried up all the streams of Egypt. What's he saying here? Do you know who you're talking to? I don't think you understand. I am the one. I am the God here. How dare you talk to me like that? Right? Who is it that you have ridiculed and blasphemed? Are you talking to me? Certainly not, right? And then he goes through about all the things that he's done. Have you not heard long ago? Eddie, I'm sorry. God's insulted here, absolutely. Have you not heard? Long ago I ordained it. In days of old I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass that you have turned fortified cities into piles of stones. There are people drained of power and dismayed and to put to shame. They are like plants in the field, like tender green shoots, like the grass sprouting on the roof, scorched before it grows up. What's he saying here? I allowed you to conquer those things. I was the one, this was part of the plan all along. I'm the one that gave you the power to destroy those cities. You haven't done anything without me saying it was okay or without me directing it. Everything you have done so far, I've had my hand in it. So now he starts off with saying, I am insulted, I am been blasphemed, I am the God, and I have, everything you've done has been because of me. But I know where you are and when you come and go and how you rage against me. Because you rage against me and because your insolence has reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will make you return by the way you came. Now, the reason that that's in there is when the Assyrians conquered peoples and made them slaves, he would take the leaders and he would pierce their noses and chain them together and make them walk through. So when he says here, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, basically saying the same thing that you've done to the people when you conquer them, I will do to you. Okay? This will be a sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself. In the second year, wheat springs from that. But in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Once more, a remnant of the kingdom of Judah will take root below and bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. He then goes on and talks about the king again. He says, he will not enter the city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with a shield or build a siege ramp against it. By the way he came, he will return. He will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend the city and save it for my sake and for the sake of David, my servant. So he tells them, maybe if you would have come to me in the first place, I would have taken care of this. But now that you have, I have heard your prayer. I will protect my city. I will do what you ask. Because I've always said I will protect you. I've always said this. All you need to do is listen to me about it. So that night the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. Sennacherib, king of Israel, broke camp and withdrew and returned to Nineveh and stayed there. So, how does God take care of this? He kills everybody in the camp of the Assyrians without a sword, without a shield, without an arrow. How does that happen? Most folks think it was probably a bacterial infection that killed the people that were there, but that came from the Lord. Okay. So, what do we learn about what God will do for us in this situation? The kingdom is shrinking pretty much at this point, right? It's getting pretty small. And he uses the word remnant. So long as there's a remnant, so long as there's some remnant of people who believe in me, I will build this kingdom back up. Relax. He goes through and says, the harvest will come again, and that's all metaphorical. Things are going to continue to grow with me again. Stay with me. I'll take care of things. Be with me, and I'll take care of you. I think that's the common lesson we hear here is This goes back to the covenant with Abraham, again with the promises to David. So long as you follow my rules, follow me, I'll take care of you. Yeah. Okay, so I have about 5 minutes to do chapter 20. Now, chapter 20 probably should be somewhere before chapter 19. But the authors did it this way, and I was going to do 20 before 19, but I really couldn't figure out a great way to do that. Because what happens in chapter 20 happens before a lot of the things that happen in chapter 19. In verse 1, we learn that in those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, went to him and said, "This is what the Lord says. Put your house in order, because you are going to die, you will not recover." Which is not a sign that you ever want to hear. Is when the prophet comes in and says, "Get things, put your house, you're going to die soon." Okay? Which is, what do you do now? So Hezekiah then turns away from Isaiah, faces the other direction, and says, "Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what is good in your eyes." And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle court, the word of the Lord came back to him. "Go back and tell Hezekiah, the ruler of my people, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. I have heard your prayer and seen in your tears. I will heal you. On the third day from now, you will go up to the temple of the Lord. I will add 15 years to your life and will deliver you in the city from the hand of the king of Syria. I will defend this city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David." Then he tells him to prepare a poultice of figs and apply it to boils, and he recovers. Hezekiah asks Isaiah, "What will the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the third day?" So firstly, before I get into that, I'm thinking about the doctor says, "You're dying, okay? Put your house in order." And then the Lord comes to me and says, "I changed my mind. You have 15 years. What was the prayer that Isaiah asked for? And this is, the way it's done is, it's not contrition or anything. "Lord, I've been really loyal to you. I've done all these things for you. I've torn down those other altars. I've been loyal to you. And this is the way you're going to repay me, right? You're going to tell me I'm going to die. I don't deserve this, basically." And in the old covenant, it was a valid principle. A way to pray is to talk about how loyal you've been, what a good servant and a good soldier you've been, as compared to the new covenant where we pray based on Jesus' righteousness, right? So there's a change in the way they pray. We would not now probably pray, if we're told we're going to die, say, "God, what are you talking about? I've taught classes at church. I've been a good guy. I'm doing all the right things. Why are you doing this to me?" That's not the way we would do things now, but okay. And then I'm thinking, hey, Tony.
I think there's another aspect of this that's important, and maybe more important than the words of Hezekiah's prayer, and that is he wept bitterly. He was touched in his heart.
Right.
And I think that that's something we all need to understand all the time, is our hearts need to be right with God. And my personal belief is that God was touched more
By the tear?
by his tears and his weeping bitterly before God
Than the way he prayed.
specific words that he used in his prayer. He's turning to God and he's weeping.
I think that's well taken. I kind of agree with that, yeah.
While you were saying that, it came to my thought, and I was like, remember the priest that went into pray to God, and knowing that it's all about him and not me.
And Wanda, you're talking about an event that happened in Luke, and it was a self-righteous man who went up and prayed and beat up the rest and talking about how great he was on one hand, and then there's the other guy who wouldn't even lift his eyes to heaven. That's what you're talking about, I think. Is that right?
Right, amen. God with him. Thank you.
And then, just to finish this up, and we're out of time here, is after he hears about this, you're going to get 15 more years. And I wanted to spend more time on what do you do if you know you have 15 years? How does that change the way you do everything else in the rest of your life? But he has the audacity to say, give me a sign. I'm not sure I follow this. Give me a sign. He says, what will be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and then I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the third day from now? Isaiah answers, this is the Lord's sign to you that the Lord will do as he's promised. Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps, and shall it go back 10 steps? So basically what happens is he makes the shadow on the sundial go the other direction to show him this as a sign. So it wasn't enough for God to say, I'm going to give you 15 years, you're fine, thank you very much, I'm out. He says, prove it. You know, that's just still that one more thing. So, okay, any questions about anything? I'm sorry, we really rushed through a lot of this. We could have done this a lot longer period of time, but. Okay, next week, Tony is going to finish up the Kings section. What are you doing?
Josiah, we're going to be looking at primarily chapters 22 and 23, but I'll expand on that as well.
And I think that's probably the culmination, bringing Israel back together, right? And then starting in December, you will get me for 13 weeks when we study. We're going to follow up John, the Wednesday's classes from John. We're going to do then 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John over the next 13 weeks after that, starting in December. So you can either plan to come or not come now. So that's all right.